Now, I don't know about you guys, but roster release day is always a happy day for me. I mean, I wake up and the sun is shining, the birds are chirping because I know that we're going to get a roster. We're going to get some names to pour over and talk about for the next few weeks. And that also means that there is U.S. Men's National Team games just around the corner. And in this case, it is the Gold Cup. The tournament it's about to, the provisional round is about to start, and then the U.S. starts in that next round in, I think, about a week and a half, so it's coming up real fast. Now, we have this roster that Greg Berhalter just released. It's got some highs, it's got some lows, it's got some players that we're really excited about and some players that we're not so excited about. And I think that's always the case. So we'll get into it. We'll explore this lineup. We'll talk about who was left out, who couldn't be there, what I'm excited to see personally. All that and more on this episode of the Yank Report. What's up? My name is Sam. Welcome to the Yank Report, the show where we talk about the U.S. Men's National Team, U.S. soccer, young players in the U.S., MLS, all that stuff. And if you're into that kind of thing and you're new here, in every video I get somebody comments that's like, I just found you, this is so cool, I'm subscribing to your channel. If you are new here, please hit the subscribe button so you can follow all the action. We've got Gold Cup coming up, we've got the transfer window about to open up, the European season is just around the corner, so there's a lot of really exciting things happening in the U.S. soccer world right now. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do so is to hit that like button. I appreciate everybody that hits the like button. It makes the video go far and wide. So let's set a like button goal. Let's say 400 likes on this video. If we get 400 likes on this video, then we are going to crush Mexico in the Gold Cup, and we're going to win every domestic tournament for the next 10 years. How about that? How about that? And some El Tri fan's gonna comment like, does your likes don't have anything to do with how Mexico performs? I know, I'm just having fun. I'm sorry, I'm excited. It's Gold Cup roster release day. So let's get into it, and let's start where we normally start. Let's start with the goalkeepers. Brad Guzan, Sean Johnson, and Matt Turner. The only name that we thought we might see was David Ochoa. David Ochoa was with the Nations League squad, but I guess Berhalter decided that he'd rather bring in veteran like Brad Guzan for this tournament and let David Ochoa have time with his team. It's the third goalkeeper, so I'm not too thrown off by that. I mean, the exciting thing is that Matt Turner is going to get some extended minutes with the national team in this tournament. Matt Turner, he's had some really big saves in MLS. He's that player that statistically the analytics just jump off the page at you. He's a player a lot of people think that deserves to be in one of those top three goalkeeper positions for the senior squad. He's a player that some people even argue should be considered for the starting position for the senior squad. So I'm not saying that that's true. I'm just saying I'm excited to see Matt Turner actually get some extended minutes with the national team. So hopefully he puts in some good performances, keeps us in some games, makes some big saves, and everything's gravy. Now let's move on to the fullbacks. At left back, it's pretty exciting because this is kind of that setup that we've been waiting for a long time. It's Sam Vines and it's George Bello. They both kind of perform similar roles for their teams, where both of them are not really stay-at-home left backs. They're kind of left backs that get upfield and then kind of drift inside and kind of move all over the place tactically. It's not surprising to see like George Bello or Sam Vines taking up like an attacking midfielder position or something like that for their club squads. They're very versatile players tactically. George Bello is one of those players that's got a really high ceiling. We're hearing some transfer rumors about George Bello right now, so maybe this Gold Cup is the moment, this international window, where he really seizes that moment and lives up to it. Now, the left back position is one where there were some very young players that were kind of talked about that could potentially get called in. Jonathan Gomez from Louisville in USL was a player that a lot of people wanted to see as part of this roster. Really dynamic player, a player that's a dual national that has also been linked with Mexico. So he's not going to be a part of this roster, as well as Kevin Paredes from DC United. He's a player that Greg Berhalter name-checked in his podcast with Bobby Warshaw prior to the release of this lineup. So we know that, you know, Greg Greg Berhalter's thinking about that player. Speaking of older players, the right back situation, we have two guys that are pretty much ancient in U.S. men's national team terms. We have Reggie Cannon and we have Shaq Moore. Now, Reggie Cannon was a bit of a surprise, not only because he's a European-based player in Portugal, and not only because he's getting transfer rumors and potentially might end up in another situation, but also because he played in the Nations League, and the expectation coming in was that the European-based players who played in Nations League were not going to see minutes in the Gold Cup. But for whatever reason, it looks like Greg Berhalter decided to bring in Reggie Cannon, so it'll be cool to have him on that back line as someone who is a part of the senior squad, just to kind of bring that to this Gold Cup roster. Behind him, we have Shaq Moore. Shaq Moore is a player that we haven't seen in a long time. I don't think that he's received a cap under Berhalter. I know that he played under Sakharin and during that interim Sakharin era. Shaq Moore is a player that plays in the second division of the Spanish Primera Division. He's a solid professional. Thing about Shaq Moore, though, is he's actually 24 years old, I believe. He's actually older than Reggie Cannon, even though he's a name that we haven't seen in a while, so it kind of feels like he's a young player. In terms of this right back position, where you have, let's see, if I can do this from memory, 20-year-old Serginho Dest, you have 19-year-old Brian Reynolds, and I believe 22 or 23-year-old Reggie Cannon. You've got three young players, and then you have a veteran in DeAndre Yedlin, who are all vying for this position. So like a 24-year-old player in Shaq Moore, who's still playing in the second division in Spain, the opportunity for him to really seize a right back position for the U.S. men's national team, I don't see it likely. But he's a part of this camp, and he'll be a great player to have in this camp. The player at right back that I'm kind of disappointed is not a part of this team is Julian Arago, the right back for LA Galaxy. Now, Greg Berhalter, in his press conference following the release of this roster, did say that Julian Arago decided not to be a part of this camp because he's still making a decision about his international future. Arago can play for Mexico, and he can play for the U.S. men's national team, and he's deciding to kind of wait and see. And I have a feeling that part of him deciding to wait and see is those names that I mentioned earlier, where you have Brian Reynolds and you have Serginho Dest and you have Reggie Cannon, three young players who were kind of in that position that's going to make it hard for a player like Julian Arago to break into. So maybe he feels like his better opportunities are with Mexico, but we don't know. We don't know what's in his head. So it's yet to be seen what happens with Yueill and Arago. All I know is that he's a great defensive right back, and he's fun to watch with the LA Galaxy. Moving on to the central defenders. We have Donovan Pines, Miles Robinson, James Sands, and Walker Zimmerman. Now, I would say of this entire roster, I think Donovan Pines is like the biggest surprise of any of the names on the list. I know I watched just about everybody's predictions for this roster, and I'm talking like everybody put out a video about their roster predictions, and nobody had Donovan Pines on it. It's kind of a question mark as to how he made it to the roster. He's a player with 0 caps, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets signed, what kind of player he looks like. That's just one that nobody was expecting. Now, one that everybody was expecting was Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman. We haven't seen much of Miles Robinson with the U.S. men's national team. He's got 3 caps. Miles Robinson is expected to be the guy that comes in and is the starter for this Gold Cup. He's supposed to be the guy that's going to lock down the defense, be that center back that can both play defense and distribute the ball out of the back whenever we're possessing from the back. A lot of big expectations from Miles Robinson. Another guy that could potentially earn a transfer. Another guy that potentially could be a part of the senior squad setup. So this Gold Cup is a big opportunity for Miles Robinson. Walker Zimmerman, we kind of know we're going to get out of Walker Zimmerman. James Sands is an interesting player. I actually, in my Gold Cup prediction, I had James Sands as a defensive midfielder. He's played there for NYCFC. He's also played at center back. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets utilized in that center back position and what he does at this level. Another young player, another player with pretty decent handles on the ball. So it'll be interesting to see out of that mix who ends up being that center back partner for Miles Robinson and how that plays out throughout this tournament. Moving on to our defensive midfielders, and I don't know exactly how Berhalter's breaking down and what he's considering each player's role, but I think that he has 3 defensive midfielders. And, you know, if you've been keeping along coming into this roster, you know that that defensive midfielder position is a big deal coming into this Gold Cup. Because during the Nations League, Tyler Adams was out for most of the games, and you know, we had Jackson Ewell play there, we had Kellen Acosta play there, and it was pretty much unanimously decided that by the fan base that neither of those guys is the player for the future that we want backing up Tyler Adams. So this is a big opportunity for someone to come in and seize that position. Now, unfortunately, both Kellen Acosta and Jackson Ewell are on this roster, so that means there's not that many new faces coming in. The one new face who is coming in is also the one player that I wanted to see on this roster more than any other, and that is Gianluca Busio, the defensive midfielder who plays for Sporting KC in MLS. And, you know, there were some questions about whether or not Busio was going to be on this roster because the transfer heat around him is just insane. It seems like every other day there's a new club that's linked to Gianluca Busio. So it seems like his days in MLS are numbered, and this Gold Cup tournament could be his swan song in the league, depending on, you know, if he gets transferred out and he leaves this summer, or if he gets loaned back to MLS, or like how that all plays out. But this is a big opportunity for Gianluca Busio to slot in at the 6th position and show what he can do, show his defense, because that's the big question mark about Busio. We know his technical ability. We know that he can distribute from the back, that he's got just silky smooth passes and touches, and his vision is tremendous. He can get in the box, and his set pieces are fantastic, and he can finish if he's around goal. The question's always going to be his defending, what he's going to be like in the center of the field, especially as the athleticism and the intensity kind of goes up whenever you reach that international level compared to MLS. What is he going to look like? So that's going to be something to watch for in this tournament. Now, Kellen Acosta and Jackson Ewell are both also on this roster. I'm assuming that Kellen Acosta is going to see time at the 8. I'm not sure what Berhalter's plans are there. Now, Jackson Ewell is a player that I've said coming in that I just didn't want to see on this roster. I thought his performances in the Nations League showed that he's just not up to the level, and he's just not one for the future. So if there's one player that I'm like just disappointed that his name is on the list, it's Jackson Ewell. Maybe Kellen Acosta gets some minutes at the 6 as well. We saw in Nations League that, you know, he's game defensively, and he brings that cockacaffiness to the field, which is useful sometimes, especially whenever you're in a scrap like we were against Mexico. But his on-the-ball ability, his technical ability, his distribution are all limited. I think the major disappointment with the defensive midfielder position is that we're not going to see Leon Flock, a player that a lot of people were saying needs to be on this roster coming into the tournament. I had him on my list of players that I wanted to see. We see him for his club team in Philly as a strong, like, enforcer type of defensive midfielder with also some quality technical ability on the ball. He's not as smooth as say, a Gianluca Busio, but he also brings a lot more defensive stability. I would say if there's one thing that I would change about this roster, one player to switch out, it would be Flock for Yule. Moving on to the attacking midfielders, and we have Sebastian Lletget, Christian Roldan, and Eric Williamson. And Sebastian Lletget is kind of that veteran in the U.S. men's national team squad at this point. We kind of know what we're going to get for him. He's going to be kind of an anchor from this team to the senior team. Christian Roldan is a player that just gets a lot of hate from the fan base. Had a really dismal 2019 Gold Cup. To be fair to Christian Roldan, he's actually had a really good start to the MLS season. He's been one of the outstanding performers for an outstanding team in Seattle Sounders. Now, we'll see how that translates to this version of the national team. That version of the national team that we saw in 2019 was different. It played different. It had different players. It was a different group than we're seeing right now. So we'll see if Christian Roldan has had a renaissance in his career late, if he's improved greatly. Eric Williamson was, of course, controversially left off of the Olympic roster, something that he said really upset him and really inspired him coming into this MLS season, and he's shown that on the field. He's been one of the outstanding performers in MLS for the Portland Timbers. We'll see what Eric Williamson can do. I know he's got a chip on his shoulder, so it would be really cool to see Eric Williamson come in and seize a starting position and be a dominant player for this U.S. men's national team during the Gold Cup. One of the players not a part of this group was Caden Clark. Caden Clark is a player that that Greg Berhalter said would have been a part of this group, except for his emergency appendectomy surgery that he had to have. By the way, Caden Clark, I also don't have an appendix, so, no appendix gang. Let's go. Of course, Caden Clark was a part of the worst kept secret in MLS that got announced recently that he will be making a move to RB Leipzig at the end of this season, so that's really cool. Now, if there's one position group that is perplexing on this roster, it is certainly the wingers. We have Paul Arriola, Nicholas Javakini, Matthew Hoppe, and Jonathan Lewis. Now, Paul Arriola, of course, is that gatekeeper player for the national team. Ton of effort, brings it 100% to every game, but has a limited ceiling, has limited, his crossing's not that great, his finishing's not that great, all that stuff. We know all about Paul Arriola. Nicholas Javakini is a player that I don't love him in the winger position. I don't really love him in the striker position. I guess the depth in this position wasn't very strong in the players that Greg had available to him. One thing that we have to mention is that it's not as if Greg could call up any player that he wanted coming into this tournament, especially the players in Europe. It would have been great to have like a Conrad De La Fuente on this list, but Conrad just made his move to Marseille and, couldn't be a part of this group. So we know that there's a lot of players that potentially could have been on this roster, but then there's like a Luca De La Torre who decided he wanted to stay with his club team, that he'd have a better opportunity to make qualifying if he stayed there. So we don't know which players were available from Europe and which players weren't. Now, one player that isn't a part of this group that is really confusing is Chris Mueller. Chris Mueller, the winger for Orlando City. I feel like he's always had good performances with the national team whenever he's been a part of it. And you juxtapose that with someone like Jonathan Lewis, who I feel like has never really had a great performance with the national team whenever he's been a part of it. Especially whenever you look at what he did for Olympic qualifying, which was just nothing really impressive, and that's supposed to be an age group that he should dominate at. So I'm really confused as to why Chris Mueller was left off this list for someone like Jonathan Lewis. We're going to see Matthew Hoppe at the winger position, according to Greg Berhalter, which is odd. We've seen him play striker with Schalke this past season. As a striker, I saw him mostly just do runs in behind, and he was great finishing in and around the box. I don't know how that translates to the winger position. Apparently, Berhalter evaluates him and thinks that he's a winger, so that'll be a curiosity to see. And considering the winger options that we have brought to the table, it's not unlikely that we see a lot of Matthew Hoppe from that winger position. So that'll be something to watch throughout this tournament. So all in all, winger group, kind of weird, but at the same time, I'm not sweating it too much because I know that at the senior position, we have Tim Way and Christian Pulisic and Giovanni Reina and Brennan Aronson, and then we also have Conrad De La Fuente that just made that move, and then we have a guy like Uli Yanes who could potentially break out at any moment, very talented winger, and then we have a guy like Jordan Morris who's going to be returning to form. So I feel like our winger depth is pretty good. None of those players are going to be in this Gold Cup, but we're like 6 deep at the winger position. So last but not least, the forwards, and we have 2 guys here. One guy that everybody wanted to see, one guy that nobody wanted to see. I think you can work out who is who. In one of my previous videos, I actually said that Gyasi Zardes was like a fan favorite, and I got so many comments that were like, Gyasi Zardes is not a fan favorite, Sam. What are you talking about? Do you not know I was messing around, guys. Of course I was joking. I know that Gyasi Zardes and Christian Roldan and Sebastian Lletget are not fan favorites. I know. So it looks like Daryl Dike is finally going to get his opportunity to really be the guy for a tournament for the U.S. men's national team. Of course, he was not a part of the Nations League group. He got that one game against Costa Rica and had a goal and had a pretty great performance. So we're going to get to see what Dike looks like for an extended period of time. That is if Greg Berhalter decides to play him over Gyasi Zardes. Now, Gyasi Zardes has long been one of the better forwards in MLS, and he's been a dependable, I guess, at least forward for the national team level. Now, the ceilings for these 2 players couldn't be any more different. Gyasi Zardes is pretty much at the peak of his ceiling right here. We know we're going to get from Gyasi Zardes game in, game out, whereas Daryl Dike, it seems like he's got the world at his fingertips. Daryl Dike is likely going to get a transfer out of MLS. potentially in this window or the next. We'll kind of see how that plays out. He just had a ridiculously dominant game for Orlando City. He's big, he's physical, he's fast, he knows how to get goals, he knows how to put himself in positions to get goals. He's just a goal scorer, and what can you say about a guy that just seems to game over game put the ball in the back of the net? Isn't that the point of this whole thing anyway? So that's the roster. I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are, what you think that we can do throughout this tournament. You know, there's going to be some tough teams. This roster, I mean, I don't know if we're going to win the Gold Cup. If we get to the final, I think that would be really exciting, and I think that's just about the extent of what we can do with this particular group of players. But I'm going to be eager to watch every minute, and we'll have plenty of videos kind of recapping everything that happens in that particular tournament. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. Who do you think are the biggest players that have been left out? Who are you kind of disappointed not to see? I know Cade Cowell's one that, like, I also know that he's good, but he hasn't quite been on that, like, Caden Clark, Gianluca Busio level in MLS this season. You know, I know that Paxton Pomacall is a player I would have loved to have seen in the midfielder position, but Greg Berhalter spoke about Pomacall, Ferreira, and Pepe specifically in his press conference and said that they just aren't at the level that he wants them to be at. So, you know, for what it's worth, Paxton Pomacall just coming off of a long injury and kind of still working himself back into it. So let me know what you think. Let me know what your expectations are coming into the tournament. As always, if you speak Spanish, por favor, leave a comment in Espanol. Así que puedo practicar mi español. How was that? That was all right, right? Thank you guys so much for watching my video. If you're still watching at this point and you are not yet subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do so is hit the like button. I have a Twitter account. You can follow me. I'm super active on Twitter at ReportYank. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.